What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the 10-7 MMA Show. Man, I have been looking forward to today's show all weekend. We had a lot of action this weekend. Some of it was quite anticlimactic, namely Friday. We're going to talk about all of that stuff today. But it was an action-packed weekend. UFC event. Oh my God. What I really pray, but I don't know to what extent this happened. I really pray that people who watched whatever that was on Friday, I'm talking about the main event in particular. I know the co-main was quite eventful and there were some other interesting boxing matches on there, but I hope whatever negative things impressions that people took away from Friday, they were at least some of those folks were able to see the UFC event on Saturday. Real fighting, real combat, real competition. That was an incredible UFC event, in my opinion, especially the co-main and the main. What's up, Tehran? So anyways, hopefully, I'm sure all of our audience got to see UFC 309, which I thought was pretty spectacular, to be honest, but I can't wait to hear your opinion. But Justin, before we get into anything, let's hit topic number one, and we're kind of going in order via time. What did you think of Friday? And by the way, I did put money on Tyson. So stupid in retrospect, but I didn't put that much, but a little bit just for fun. And of course, I obviously lost. I bet on him to win in the first 4 rounds. Well, what are your thoughts on the Tyson fight?
I mean, I see everyone hating on this, and you're showing a little bit of hate on it. It was uneventful, but I mean, honestly, what did you expect? It went exactly how it should have went. It went exactly how, if you just look at it as a whole, it went exactly how it was supposed to go. Everyone, I made that video that it's probably gonna get posted today or tomorrow. It's the fight. I mean, it's a 27-year-old superstar athlete that's juiced to the gills fighting a 58-year-old man that doesn't need to be in there, take this kind of damage. I mean, again, people are giving it flack, like, oh, it was very uninteresting. It was very, anticlimactic.
It was horrible.
I mean, it went exactly how it was supposed to go. There's nothing that about the fight that surprised me. If it got past the first round, Tyson was going to gas out again. He's 58 years old. He's had medical problems. I mean, that first round, I mean, you saw glimpses of the former Tyson with his head movement and throwing big shots. But again, he's heavy right now. He's juiced up as well. His heart probably can't take it. After the second and third round, it just felt like Tyson was in there just to survive, to say he went the distance and didn't get finished. With that being said, I also felt Jake Paul carried him. He hurt him a couple times, and he didn't go in there. And I don't think it was a script. Everyone's like, oh, he's following the script. No, man, the script that came out was that he's going to get knocked out in the fifth, or the hypothetical script. Mike Tyson was in there to prove a point. And I think, about a quarter way into that fight, he realized that he made a mistake. He realized he's old. He realized he's 58. He realized that he shouldn't have been in there. And, he shouldn't have been in there. And we've always talked about it. Obviously there's that little whisper in the back of our head that, hey, we want Tyson to go in there and knock him out. But at the end of the day, it's a fairy tale, man. And the fight went, I don't know why people are disappointed. Because the fight went exactly how it was supposed to go. The fight went exactly how it should have went. I mean, the 58-year-old man just can't keep up with the 27-year-old, and it doesn't matter, given any circumstance. It doesn't matter who you are. Father Time always wins, no matter what.
Okay, so I'll tell you why I was disappointed, because I feel like I was hoodwinked. So I can go back. We look back at the Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather fight, which this had notes of that. It was kind of similar in some ways, where everybody was basically like, what are we doing here? This is an MMA fighter fighting the greatest boxer of all time, even though he's a little bit older, but he's clearly so disadvantaged. This is going to be stupid. But people got me to believe. I guess that's what it is. It's almost like a manipulation to the public of getting people. Conor is so amazing at the press conferences, and he just so confident, and got me to believe, and got a bunch of people to believe, that he actually was going to beat Floyd Mayweather. Then you have the outcome of the fight, and then it's like everybody looks back and they're like, obviously, what were you expecting? You're an idiot. But I'm like, yeah, well, what can I say? I listened to the press conference. Like, I want to believe. And so for somebody like me, it's easy to convince me, because I want to believe that it's a real fight. I want to believe Conor can overcome this massive obstacle and come away victorious. And it was the same thing here, although it was kind of, it was weird. It was like a Conor Floyd reboot, but a totally different dynamic. And now the up and comer was the guy who was clearly given the advantage. And we have Tyson, who's the vet, who should be by all accounts, the better boxer had such a massive age disadvantage that counteracted. So everybody was saying, of course, Jake Paul is going to win. But then you see the footage that they released. You want to believe that Tyson can win. And then Tyson looks so confident, supremely confident in all these interviews. And then you have some guys like, Jesse on Fire was absolutely convinced. He thought it was just a ridiculous thing. He said right before the fight that, and I'm not trying to throw shade at Jesse, but he said the only way, what's up, Two Smelly Fingers, the only way that Mike Tyson wins is if Jake Paul throws the fight. That's what he said. And he was very confident. This is somebody that knows combat sports. Obviously, he's an MMA expert more than a boxing expert, but he felt very, very confident that, and it was just completely wrong. So I'm not the only one that I think that fell for this. I think a lot of people, even people who are pretty big combat sports athletes, fell for the hype. But the thing about it is not the outcome, I think, that is surprising, but you see the training footage and you see what was happening. Where I am shocked is I'm just so curious to know what Jake Paul feels like today and this morning, because to me, it's like you're putting on one of the biggest sporting events of all time. And people probably knew inside the camps that it was going to look the way it did. Mike Tyson himself said that over the summer, he nearly died. He had to get 8 blood transfusions, something insane. So his health was severely compromised. I just can't believe that they would want to put this on to this massive audience of who knows how many people watched it.
65 million.
That's what I predicted. That I said 70. Okay, that's crazy.
65 million.
Like, why would you, as a matter of principle, as just a matter of having some pride over your product, how could you even want to put that out there to the world? Jake Paul, and God, it just really bums me out. Jake Paul has said over and over how he's saving boxing, how he's revitalizing it. And I felt like he was, because in a lot of ways he was bringing MMA fans or new fans or younger fans to the sport of boxing, which, I feel like is kind of lame compared to mixed martial arts, just by comparison. You're a true badass if you get into the ring and have a boxing match. No, you won't have me disagreeing with that sentiment, but comparatively, I think that mixed martial arts is just such a superior sport. So he was bringing all this attention to it, and then it like climaxes to this massive event with the biggest viewership of all time, and it's just so bad, so uneventful. And forget about how people even thought the fight was going to go. If you just sat down to watch it, didn't know much about it. Can you say that was an interesting? Was that even a fight?
Dude, it was a nostalgic moment for guys like me who are Mike Tyson fans that wanted to see him get in the cage or in the ring. We can chalk this up to, I firmly believe Mike Tyson thought he was going to win. I don't think that was disingenuous. I think he was being very genuine. When you have a mindset of a natural born killer that has this almost invincible cloak that he wears, he's the baddest man on the planet. They always talked about if he transitioned to MMA, being short and being strong, how he would have done in MMA. I don't think there's any chance in hell that Mike Tyson thought he was going to lose this fight. Whether his coaches did or anybody else did is a different story. But what really convinced me, and I don't know if you know this, I might have told you, right before the fight started or right before 7 p.m. came along, I bet almost every dollar I had in the betting industry that I have on Jake Paul. And, I was convinced. We had him on the show, Aaron O'Rourke, professional sports bettor. I'm talking to him on the phone about this, and I'm thinking about putting money on Tyson for that first round knockout, because I did believe if he hit him hard, and there was glimpses in that first round where Jake looked scared. Jake was flinchy. Jake did not want to get hit by Mike Tyson. That is not fake. That's not fake. That was real. Jake was scared. Mike, I think he felt Mike's power in that first round. He's like, fuck, I don't want to get hit by that. Obviously, it wasn't sustainable for 8 rounds, but for the first 2 minutes, it definitely was. And Aaron said, he goes, listen, he said, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was something along the lines of, listen, I'm a professional sports bettor because when I make my bets, I take emotion out of it. The reason you think Mike Tyson is going to win, because emotionally you want that satisfaction of this old man coming in and knocking him out. But in a realistic sense, when you take your emotion out of it, there's no chance, unless it's a rigged fight, that he can win. There's no chance. And when he said that, I was like, dude, you're absolutely right. It's my emotions, my excitement of wanting this man to come back. So right before the fight, I bet several $1,000s on Jake Paul to win this fight. It's it might be the second biggest sports bet, if not the biggest sports bet I've ever placed. Because again, Aaron, when when he put it on a logical saying, he goes, Mike Tyson might win 1 out of 25 times, and things will have to go so right for that to happen. He goes, and Aaron ended up putting 40,000 on it.
Wow.
And yeah, in 40,000, that's, my bet obviously wasn't that big, but I put a couple thousand on it. And, when he explained it to me like that, take your emotion out of it. And how do you feel about this fight? That's exactly how I thought was going to happen. And it's exactly what did happen.
I guess it's just like when you look at the training, I don't know. I don't even know what to say, because how do you make an informed decision where I feel like there could be such variability in terms of how age affects people, which you've mentioned many times. And we even saw Anderson Silva go in and fight in his late 40s. Look, I just don't know what's the drop off point. And then you see some of that footage of him hitting pads and looking really sharp and powerful. But then other people say, well, it's so easy to look good on pads. Anybody can look good on pads if you take little excerpts. I don't know. I just feel very manipulated. I feel like it was just so boring. Forget about even Mike Tyson having a shot or not. It was just the most uneventful, boring, terrible fight I've ever seen. And then when Jake Paul comes back and says he spared him, I don't even know it. I don't know how to feel.
I wish he wouldn't have said that. I think he did. I do think he carried him in those last rounds. I don't think he wanted to hurt him, especially in the 8th round.
Yeah.
I do believe that. I don't think Jake. I think Jake is being genuine about that. I just wish that he wouldn't have said that. We all could see that he was, kind of sparing him. He was kind of taking it light. He still was cracking him hard, but from an overall pressure standpoint, Jake was kind of fighting him from the outside. I really think if he wanted to, he could have put the pressure on Mike and really finished him there and made him look silly. So I do appreciate that. No reason for this 58-year-old man to take any more damage than he already had. I just wish he wouldn't have said it, because it takes a lot of, I'm sure that hurt Tyson's ego. And there's one more thing, and I would like Luisa to clip this that I'm about to say. Before the fight happened, you and I talked about why we thought Mike was going to win, and I want to give a huge shout out to Ron Frazier, Randy Couture's former head coach, one of the coaches at Extreme Couture. The couple days or the day before the fight happened, Ron told me Mike Tyson is not going to win this fight due to his balance issues. He's 58 years old. He has balance issues. Now, fast forward to the fight. In the 3rd round or the 4th round, I can't remember, the commentator comes out and says, look at Mike's balance. His balance has been off since the round 1. And I lost my shit, because this is exactly what Ron Frazier said. Huge shout out to Ron Frazier to go show his fight intelligence, his fight IQ. The guy's been around the game since, Randy Couture started. He was Randy Couture's coach. And for him to specifically say Mike Tyson is going to lose this fight due to his balance, and then the commentators, the announcers talk about Mike's balance throughout the fight and how terrible his balance looked. Huge shout out to Ron Frazier. A perfect fight IQ. I couldn't call it that well. That just goes to show how smart Ron Frazier is when it comes to fighting.
Yeah, and Justin had told me that last week, and I didn't want to say anything because I assumed that was confidential information, of course. And so we obviously would have never ever talked about it anywhere until, I guess, after the fact. I wasn't even going to bring it up today unless you did.
I thought we talked about it on the show. I thought we talked about it on the show.
Oh, did we even bring it up? I can't even remember. Okay, so
I thought
we might have. Okay, but I just wasn't sure. So you have a relationship with him, and you know what's okay to share and what's not. But yeah, I mean, I was thinking that during the fight too. I'm like, whoa, he just does not look like he can get his head movement. Like everything just looked off, and I think you could probably boil that all down to this balance issue. But anyways, I don't know. It's pretty funny. Like Ariel Helwani and his crew are talking about the fights today, and obviously, he's so biased at this point because he has a deal with Jake Paul and MVP Productions. And I know Ariel prides, and no, big fan of Ariel, no disrespect, but I know he likes to pride himself on being a pure journalist and unbiased. Obviously, I'm sure that's really hard to do in his position because he's probably getting paid quite well from Jake Paul and wants to continue to be a part of his promotions and his events. But like for them to say, I don't even know, like they're trying to call it like a big success for Jake Paul because he got so many people, so many eyes on him and he can do things next. I just don't see how that's real. I just don't see how this was a win for Jake Paul. I feel like it has to be a massive loss. And I can say as a fan of combat sports myself, this is the first time where I'm really uninterested to see what he's doing next. I don't really have an interest. Yeah.
No, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. No, I'm here.
No, I just feel kind of scammed. I feel, how could you, why would you want it? And maybe he didn't want to do it, but it was too late. Maybe that happened. I don't know. But I just feel like if you really are trying to achieve, climb this massive hill, which I totally respect, and do these great things for combat sports, boxing, even for MMA, you want to have an MMA fight and you want to bring all these eyeballs to these amazing sports. and then you go out and do that, or willingly do that and put on that perform. I just don't get it. So for me, for right now, unless they come up with something really interesting for the next fight, I don't know. I'm kind of out of the Jake Paul business for now. How about you? Do you want to see him fight again?
I don't, but here's the thing. You call it a loss. If you look in Jake's bank account, there's no loss in that bank account, man. And here's another thing. We can talk about this because we're emotional about it right now. We feel like we just got scammed. But I tell you what, if we wait 6 months and let our emotions chill out and relax, and Jake Paul is going to go fight the next guy, and it's free on Netflix, unfortunately, our emotions are going to settle, and you and I are both going to tune into the free fight on Netflix. It's just, he attracted 65 million, and a lot of people are offended. Francis Ngannou even came out and said, "Jake, what was that? Like, next time I see you, I'm going to slap you." Like, now he has this heel approach, and he's playing it really well. But he just beat up a legend in front of 65 million people, almost embarrassed him. One thing I didn't like Jake did was sticking his tongue out at Mike Tyson. Like, I hate that shit. It's like, dude, the guy can't do anything to you. Of course, do that in front of Francis Ngannou. Do that in front of somebody that can actually fight, especially in that position you're in. But Jake is playing it off, and I know right now, again, we're emotional, so we're going to say we're not going to tune in, we're not going to support, but we are going to, because we want to see him lose and get knocked out so bad. We're not going to tune in for Jake. We're going to tune in for the chance that we're going to get to see him get knocked out in front of 65 million people next time on Netflix.
Well, that is true. So if they put him against Canelo, like he's talking about, or some like really tough competition,
dude, Canelo's 140 pounds. Like, this Canelo call out is the most insane looter. Like, Jake is 230 pounds. Oh, we're gonna meet at 200. So Canelo's gonna have to gain 50 pounds. Like, that's just like Logan Paul versus Floyd Mayweather. Logan Paul was so much bigger than Floyd. Floyd, I mean, obviously is a better boxer, but they went to decision because the power of Floyd can't hurt Logan Paul. I mean, say what you want, and grappling is always like, oh, well, grappling's, to defend against size. Listen, if I am a very high level grappler, I'm going to say I'm a black belt. I'm a brown belt, but I've been a brown belt for almost 10 years. And if I go and grapple a bodybuilder, let's say Ronnie Coleman in his prime, I'm going to have problems. Like, I'm not saying that my technique isn't better, but the strength difference and the size difference are going to give me some severe problems. I'm not saying that I'm probably not going to win, but it's not going to be in 30 seconds. It's not, unless I happen to catch his neck. And that's the same thing with Floyd Mayweather, Logan Paul. And that's the same thing with Canelo and Jake Paul. And unfortunately, if Canelo goes up to 200 pounds and fights Jake Paul, the fight is going to look a lot more competitive than it really is, just because of the size and strength advantage.
See, this is again why I get confused. Most people are saying, and I don't know who to believe, they're like, well, put him in there against Canelo. Canelo will destroy him. Even Tehran is saying Canelo may be lighter, but I still think he kicks Jake Paul, beats Jake Paul very, very easily. But then now you're saying, hey, and I've heard other people say that. I've heard Michael Bisping say, hey, this is nonsense. I don't want to see this because there's a big size differential. This is a stupid fight. I just don't know. Do you get what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying. And Canelo's going to win the fight. And he's going to win it handily. It's going to be easy. Okay. I don't think it's going to be a competitive fight. Just like Floyd Mayweather versus Logan Paul, it wasn't a competitive fight. Logan went in there to see if he could survive with the greatest defensive boxer of all time. But again, he could hit him like Floyd Mayweather can hit Logan Paul with the hardest right hand, but getting hit by Floyd Mayweather compared to getting hit by Francis Ngannou are going to be two different things. Floyd's offense, his technique is so much better than Francis, but at the end of the day, Francis is just so big and so powerful that it's not going to matter. Now, something that I am interested in Jake Paul works for the PFL. Francis Ngannou works for the PFL. What if the PFL does a boxing match? And that definitely is in the cards to something like that, because that's there. Now we have a fight. I think Jake Paul
versus Francis.
Yes.
Whoa.
Jake Paul in the PFL. Jake Paul might be a better skilled boxer than Francis. He might be. I'm not saying he is. Francis is my teammate, and I'm not throwing shade. He's an incredible fighter, but he's not a boxer. He's an MMA fighter. Jake Paul only trains in boxing. He only ever has trained in boxing. So his technique might be better, but can he deal with the size and strength advantage of disadvantage of Francis Ngannou? The PFL needs to put on Jake Paul versus Francis Ngannou in a boxing match. PFL main event. You heard it here first. That's the fight to make.
Wait a minute. Did you just come up with this, or did you come up with this over the weekend?
I just came up with this right now.
This is genius. This solves everything. So this solves Francis's next fight, which everybody was wondering what he should do. This will solve Jake Paul's dilemma too. This would make me want to watch the fight just because I want to see Francis.
And sorry to interrupt. I know I'm interrupting, but
Go.
Dana White throws a lot of shade. And now that I'm not under contract with the UFC, I can throw some shade back. I don't really care for how Dana and the rest of the business, everybody in the UFC handles business. They throw a lot of shade at the PFL. Oh, how many pay-per-view bells did it have? Well, guess what? Jake Paul versus Francis Ngannou will be a huge event. And especially, what if the PFL went out on a limb because Netflix just did it and made a ton of money and said, hey, guess what? Jake Paul, Francis Ngannou boxing match, free event in the PFL.
Yeah, or do it with Riyadh Season or something like that. I mean, there's lots of options. You get both of those big names. Those are the two biggest names under the PFL banner, under the PFL name. Holy smokes, that's so interesting. And then Jake, that would be very interesting. Okay, you brought me back. You brought me back to Jake Paul wanting to see something else. That's really good. We got to definitely clip this up, and maybe we'll make a longer video. Maybe both of us will make a longer video about diving into this. But anyways, that's interesting. Okay, we got to move on because we got to talk about real fighting, real combat sports. By the way, Two Smelly Fingers says, why do they wait so long to hand out belts in BJJ? Justin, if you want to answer that. And then Tehran says, I don't think Jake Paul accepts a fight with Francis. I don't know. I think he might. He always does. He likes to push the envelope. What do you think?
I think whether he fight, I'm going to answer both questions. So I mean, I think it's the fight to make, and the reason is this: is if Jake can get in there and go to decision, even if he loses, Francis almost beat Tyson Fury. All right, if he gets in there, and again, Tyson Fury is one of the greatest in the boxing world. If he gets in there and can compete with Francis, even if he loses, that still tells the world that, hey, this guy can compete with some of the best guys in the world. I think it's a win-win for Jake Paul because, again, finally he'll get the credibility of fighting a real fighter. And, again, from a technical standpoint, Jake Paul might be a better boxer. And if somehow he pulls off a win against Francis Ngannou, guess what? Jake Paul's the real deal, and nobody's going to be throwing shade at him anymore. Not to mention, he's going to make another 10, 20, 30, 40 million, especially with all the Saudi guys that are involved with the PFL. He's going to get paid. Now, to go answer Smelly Fingers is I could have probably had the brown a black belt by now. I just don't like putting on a gi. I think it's very slow. It's a very slow paced grappling style, and I'm more of a top game pressure. So it's more of my neglect of not getting my black belt than anything else.
Okay, this is very interesting. So we got to move on because we got to talk about UFC 309. Holy smokes. What an event. Let's start with the main event. Jon Jones is the GOAT. I really want to hear your thoughts because I've been hearing a mix of reviews. A lot of it's been annoying me because people are trying to take away credit from Jon Jones. Even the commentating team was like, Stipe is looking slow. And if you rewatch the fight, rewatch it a couple times, he did not look slow in round one. He only coincidentally started looking slow after Jon Jones landed that beautiful trip, which I've never seen. And people have said they've never seen that in the heavyweight division either. I don't remember what it was called, but there's a name for it, where he threw Stipe on the ground. It was beautiful. Jumped on top of him, and the ground and pound was vicious. Like he nailed him with elbows and and after that he slowed down, but that was because he got smashed and completely wobbled. I think his balance was messed up in round 2 and round 3. So I've been hearing just nonsense, or then people saying, oh, it's his age, look, he's older, like it just catches up to you. It's like he doesn't look slow in round 1. So I don't know what people are talking about and trying to discredit Jon Jones. Like, when is it going to stop? I don't know, this is absolutely ridiculous. Justin, let me just turn over to you first. Do you come away from this being impressed by Jon Jones' performance?
Jon looked fine. I mean, he didn't look, as his former self. I mean, the thing I didn't like about the fight, the biggest thing I didn't like about the fight is how much stroking the commentators are doing. Like, Jon could do no wrong. He landed jab, and like, oh my God, he landed such a hard jab, and Stipe landed a good jab cross, and like, okay, well, Stipe, might be finding his. It's like it just felt like the commentary was so biased. And you know what? I'll tell you this too, and I said it in the video that I made last night, is I don't think Stipe wanted to be in there. I don't think he took this fight serious. I think he was there for a payday. And here's a couple reasons why. I'm not just saying that, but I know that it came out that Stipe didn't take work off leading up to this fight. And you guys know he's a Cleveland firefighter. That is a very, very mentally and physically taxing job. You work 48-hour shifts up to 72-hour shifts, meaning that for that 48 to 72, your sleep might be neglected. He's not going to be training during those 2 or 3 days. He didn't do hardly any interviews leading up to the fight. When his demeanor in the cage, as the bell even rang, he looked broken already. When he was on the ground, he wasn't really trying to get up. I felt he was just trying to survive. I thought Stipe looked terrible. I agreed with the commentary. I thought he looked slow. I thought he looked out of pace. And yeah, the body shots might have something to do with it. But what really sold me is in Stipe didn't want to be there is after the fight, they said, "Hey, are you done?" "Oh, I'm done. I'm done. I'm not getting back in here. I'm done." He jumped to the gun to retire so fast. He didn't even get to let it sink to think a second to sink in of what just happened. I mean, don't get me wrong. Jon Jones had some devastating elbows, devastating spinning back kick. What's really affected Stipe the most were the teep kicks. He throws the way Jon was throwing that teep kick. He almost made it look like a round kick, and that comes from Savate. Savate is a form of French kickboxing. They call it Savate. It's French foot fighting, and the way you throw that round kick is you dig your toes in. So if this is my hand, instead of hitting with like the top of my hand or the shin, you curl your toes like this so that toes get jabbed right into your liver.
And that's what Jon,
and you and I believe you and I have talked about that technique before in our training session. It's a form of French foot fighting. You want to dig your toes in, the ball of your foot. Darren Cruikshank is big on it. With that being said, I didn't think Jon looked great. I thought he looked good. I thought he looked good enough to beat Stipe. But Stipe is an old man. I don't think he wanted to be in there, and it took Jon a long time to finish it. Now, if you talk somebody like Tom Aspinall, who's up and coming UFC heavyweight champ, he's hungry. He wants to win. He wants the fight. I don't think it's a good idea for Jon Jones to take that fight. With that being said, we talked about this on the show last week. Jon Jones was denying any chance of that fight even happening, talking about possible retirement. But what I told you on the show is Jon Jones is doing what champions do. He's putting everything else on the back burner. He was focused on his task at hand. He didn't want to talk about the Tom Aspinall. He didn't even acknowledge that it might happen. All right. And I told you that's what champions do. He's taking away all the claims that this Tom Aspinall fight might happen, so he can focus on Stipe. As soon as he was done with Stipe, then he was going to invite it back in, and that's just exactly what he did. He said afterwards, maybe we'll give you the fight he won, hinting at the Tom Aspinall, because now that he doesn't have to worry about Stipe, he can worry about the next task at hand. The next task at hand might be Tom Aspinall, and I think Jon Jones did what he's exactly supposed to do as a champion, as a fighter, as the greatest of all time. Don't let your mind get distracted before the fight about Tom Aspinall. Handle Stipe and then invite the next opportunity.
Okay. All right. So first, by the way, I watched the post-fight presser, so there's a little more details on that. So he did say, hey, maybe we'll give you guys what you want. And I took that as an indication that he was going to fight Aspinall. That's what I felt like he was saying. Then he was asked about it at the post-fight presser, and he said, nah, he's not really still interested in fighting Aspinall. He really wants the Alex Pereira fight. But then he said, but if the UFC and everybody really, really wants him to fight Aspinall, he's potentially open to it, but he needs that FU money. So basically he wants like a massive, massive payday. And he specifically said, I want enough money so that I don't even care if I win or lose. So I don't know if this is going to happen. I'm very curious. Dana White is saying that this will be the biggest fight in the history of the heavyweight division. I don't know. And I'm not going to lose sleep over it if it doesn't happen. I'm not itching to necessarily see Jon Jones risk his legacy and go out and fight an up-and-comer, because there's going to be an endless stream of up-and-comers. Remember, if Sergey Pavlovich had won that fight, everybody would be clamoring for him to fight Sergey. So it's not about Tom or it's not about Sergey. It's about who would have won that fight. And again, there's always going to be somebody winning fights. There's always going to be a new up-and-comer young guy that's hungry, that wants to fight Jon Jones. It never ends. So I don't care. I'm okay with him never taking that fight and retiring with this tremendous legacy. The second thing is, I loved his performance last night. Now, you're the professional fighter. You're the expert on this, so you know better than me. But I was blown away by the variation of strikes. I mean, you mentioned that beautiful body kick that he landed a couple times. One time Stipe said it was a low blow, but it was not. The commentary team said that was absolutely not a low blow. Plus he landed some amazing, they were partially blocked, but some amazing head kicks as well. Beautiful roundhouses. And then that trip out of nowhere. I don't even know if he practiced that or that came out of nowhere, but that was beautiful. I didn't see anything like that. The ground and pound was vicious. And then what a way to end the fight with the spinning back kick. That's something that people have said we almost never see that in the heavyweight division. Who's throwing a spinning back kick like that in a heavyweight
We don't see that really at any division, man. I mean, it does happen every now and then, but it's not like it's a consistent thing, especially at a heavyweight. You're absolutely right.
And you see, Max Holloway threw a bunch of those against Justin Gaethje. Connor is actually pretty good at those spinning back kicks. We did see it with who was that fighter at the beginning of the card who was an amazing kickboxer? I can't remember his name. Fiera or something. I hadn't seen him fight before, but he was I think it was the first fight that kicked it off. He threw some crazy spinning attacks as well. But for Jon Jones as a heavyweight to be throwing stuff like that, the dynamic nature of his strike, just his entire game, and probably so many intricacies that he specifically planned for Stipe and what he perceives as Stipe's weaknesses. I don't know. I was blown away. And if he does choose to take that Tom Aspinall fight, I have heard a lot of people say that they think Kevin Iole in particular, he thinks Jon Jones beats Aspinall. He thinks nobody beats Jon Jones in his prime because of just how excellent he looks. So that's what I think. And the funny thing is, I think if they make that fight, I hope Jon Jones wins. And I'm really disappointed that so many people put so much attention on Aspinall during this fight, ruining the buildup and ruining this moment for Jon Jones. But I think he got it back, and I think he had a great speech at the end of the fight, and really, really brought fans back onto his side. I hope it. But anyways, yeah, if he does fight Aspinall, I think he's going to get it. And then he's going to retire and be like, now what? But I guarantee you, if he beats Aspinall, if we go 5 years in the future, he'd be like, oh yeah, and he ended his career and beat which guy again? Oh yes. Like, I'm just saying, if Aspinall doesn't come back and then reclaim the championship, doesn't have a tremendous run, which he might, but there's a very good chance that like that might be it, or maybe he'll come back and reclaim it. Then he's not going to have the same career as Jon Jones. It's almost impossible in the heavyweight division. So even if he does fight him, people will be like, oh yeah, he beat this guy and this guy, this guy. Oh, and then he ended his career with this one guy who was a champ for a little bit. But yeah, the real big fights were Stipe and Daniel Cormier. I think that's what's going to happen. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say, man. Jon Jones is in a position right now where he can handpick his opponents for the rest of his career, man. He's done so much for the sport. He's done so much for the UFC. Good, bad, ugly, doesn't matter. He's just done so much. I mean, again, he made his UFC debut in 2008. To still be active over 15 years later in the UFC as the best, fighting champion after champion after champion. Jon Jones has earned his right to do whatever the hell he wants, and he can handpick his opponents for the rest of his career.
Thank you. And I don't want to hear of fans being like, no, you need to fight Tom Aspinall. He doesn't need to do anything. You said it exactly right. Why does he need to? It's ridiculous. It makes me so mad. And it's actually not fighters who are saying this. That's what I've noticed. It's all the journalists that are saying that he's got to. This is ridiculous. He's ducking. He needs to do this. He needs to do that. And I'm just like, I'm confused.
All those journalists have never fought before, and they're fucking idiots, and they don't know anything about anything. They think because they watch guys on TV, like, we're not robots. We just don't show up 100% all the time. And Jon Jones has shown his consistency as a champion is better than anybody else to ever do it. Fuck journalists. I think they're fucking scumbags. They've never been punched in the face, excluding Oscar Willis, who I have a lot of love for. He's one of the incredible UFC journalists that has actually gotten in there. He had an MMA fight. I was his coach during the fight. I cornered him. Then he just went over to bare knuckle. And the reason he's doing it is because he wants to see the other side of the coin. He just doesn't want to sit behind a desk and make his opinion based when there's a lot more to it than all these fucking other bum ass journalists think.
So I'll say this. I will say New York Rick on the Ariel Helwani show today, he did say, look, at the end of the day, whatever happens with Jon Jones next, the ball is in the UFC's court, not Jon Jones, regardless of what he's saying. He was one of the first people that I've heard finally have said what I've been saying, is that stop getting on Jon Jones's case. This is up to the UFC whether or not the belt's on the line and whether or not he fights Stipe. So let's let that go. And I do think there are some MMA journalists that do a great job, but some of these guys are jumping on Jon Jones's case for not fighting this person, not fighting that person. I just don't understand how you can have this type of perspective when, again, I'm not saying you have to have fought to be a journalist, but just approach it with, just try and, I don't know, have some empathy and have some understanding of what fighters go through. And before you speak so definitively about this guy has to do that guy has to do this. I mean, we see all the time fights not happening that we call, I mentioned this before. Could we say that, but when Bilal fought Colby, he was ducking Shavkat? Did anybody say that? No, because we obviously recognize that the UFC wanted to put Colby in there. Even Bilal was saying Colby didn't deserve it, but that wasn't a ducking. This has happened so many times where there's probably a better, more skilled, more talented up-and-comer than who is scheduled to fight. We saw this with Sean O'Malley versus Chito Vera, right? There's a more talented up-and-comer, but the UFC chooses to do something else. So that's what this is. Let it go, people. And if Jon Jones does fight Tom Aspinall, you guys better give him so much massive respect that it's out of control. Even if he fights Alex Pereira, you got to give him a lot of respect because that's a very dangerous matchup. But anyways, I loved the main event. I thought it was phenomenal. I thought Jon Jones had a great post-fight speech in the cage. I thought it was a tremendous moment. He talked to Elon Musk afterwards, the president-elect, he talked to, I think, Kid Rock. He was just, and he was even saying, I watched it back again a second time, and he was like, oh my God, Kid Rock, Elon Musk, this is so cool. This is wild. Like, he was still at this long of a champ, just like eating it up and enjoying that whole event. So yeah, massive congratulations. I loved it. I can't wait to see Jon Jones come back. And if you're not excited, unless it's Tom Aspinall, you don't know what you're watching. So that's all I got to say about that. We got a couple comments, and then we're going to go to the next topic here. Yeah. So Teron Brown says I think Jon Jones embarrasses Tom. I mean, dude, if he goes out there and if he annihilates Tom, I mean, he's not just going to embarrass Tom. He's going to embarrass a lot of people that have been going on and on and on and on about how Jon Jones is ducking because he knows Tom Aspinall's a tough matchup, blah, blah, blah. It's going to embarrass a lot of people. And then Teron says people accusing Jones of ducking Tom in a way reminds me of when Floyd was I think he meant ducking Manny Pacquiao. So yeah, I don't know much about that, but maybe you know more about that reference. Okay, let's move it on to the co-main event. Man, I got a lot to ask about this one from your perspective. But let me start off by saying that you really saw. I think you tell me. I know Michael Chandler, and you've trained together, and I know you're friends with him, but I mean, I thought you could really see the difference in the skill levels. I mean, Oliveira looked incredible. Watching him there against Mike Chandler that second time, like you could almost see, maybe this is true, maybe this isn't, but Oliveira looked so much better and so much kind of superior to Michael Chandler. If you contrast that to the first time they fought, he was just in absolute control of the entire fight, with the exception of like portions of round 5. And even those portions, there were a lot of fouls and a lot of legal strikes, which I want to talk about with you as well. But anyways, what are your first takeaways about this fight and about the outcome?
Man, as you know, I chose Mike Chandler to win this fight. I put a nice little bag on him to win this fight, and he looked terrible, man. Charles Oliveira came out, and I'll be honest, man, I didn't think he was going to come up and muster that kind of performance, dude. I thought, he was going to be lackluster seeing him at the weigh-ins. He looked very depleted. But man, did he beat Michael Chandler in there was no, besides the closing, the 5th round when, Mike had him hurt. But 1 through 4, all Charles Oliveira, his striking looks so good and so crisp.
Mm-hmm.
His wrestling, I mean, we're talking about a Division I wrestler in Mike Chandler, and for Oliveira to go in there and take him down the way he did, and not only take him down, but multiple times, and then to hold him down, getting him in that body lock, crushing Mike's ribs, holding him in those positions, flattening him out, and Mike Chandler, like, he's losing a lot of luster with me, man. Like, I just thought, like, at the end of the fight where he was standing up and like slamming back, like, that was just idiotic. Like,
really,
it was idiotic, and people were like, oh, it was so cool that he was doing that. It's like, actually, it's the dumbest shit he ever could have done, given from a strategic standpoint. By slamming him on his back, he's only exposing his own neck. He's not going to do anything. There's so much cushion in the cage that doesn't even hurt when you do that. Like, I don't know what he was. I know he was doing it more for the climatic effect of, oh, I'm slamming him on his back and I'm so strong in this. But there's actually techniques to do to improve the position and win the fight. So if you look at that. When you look at that position, Charles Oliveira is on his back, and in MMA we call it a backpack. He has both hooks in, and he's around the head, and he's just holding tight. Well, typically when you're in a backpack position, especially when you're as tall as Charles Oliveira, your head is going to be above your opponent's head. So in this position, Charles Oliveira is backpacked on him. So on Mike's head, Charles's head is up here. Actually, it's usually off to the side because he'll be almost resting his head on the shoulder. Well, there's a technique where you can front roll, and since that Oliveira's head is above Chandler's head, you can spike their head off the canvas and in turn knock your opponent out. It's happened in the UFC a bunch. I did it in college on three separate occasions, to where when you're again in that position, because Oliveira's hands are wrapped around the chest, so he can't let go to post. So the first thing to hit is his head, usually his forehead, and in turn, again, can knock your opponent out. I thought it was very elementary and very childish that what Mike Chandler was doing to me in that last sequence when he was slamming him. He had an opportunity, although it was a small chance opportunity, whether it's even a 1% chance opportunity. He still had the opportunity, did it, and he didn't do it. Just goes to show the maturity of him as a fighter. I think his career's over. I think he's 2-5 now in the UFC. I mean, he's gonna be a gatekeeper for some up and comer. But I don't really care to watch Mike Chandler fight anymore after that.
Wow, fascinating perspective. Okay, so let me respond, or not respond, but let me tell you what I was kind of what my emotions were as I was watching that fifth round, because I got pretty excited actually seeing Michael Chandler finally have some success. He almost finished the fight, which was crazy. And I actually was cheering along when he did the back slams, because it was almost like an homage to the first fight where he did that. And that, I think that's why people were going so nuts. And then he did it twice, and that was just crazy. And so it was almost like a theatrical close to that fight. But now when you put it in that perspective, in that light, hey, that was basically him giving up and not even trying or doing something.
Exactly, and
Yeah, yeah.
that's why I lost all my credit. And I like Mike; he was a former teammate of mine. But when he started doing that, I knew that he gave up, and it looked dramatic and it looked exciting, but it literally did absolutely nothing to the outcome. He stopped trying to after he stood up and didn't flip forward. I'm telling, like, I'm not joking. I was with some people. I'm like, dude, he needs to front flip. Like, his head's too high. He has an opportunity to still win here. And when Mike went backwards for the first time, that was in my head him conceding the rest of the fight.
Fair enough. Okay, I want to go back. I still want to talk more about this fight. We just got a comment from, I think, maybe somebody new to the show, Exy Benitez, but he's talking about the Jake Paul fight. I just want to respond to this really quickly. He said, I'm tired of all the people that are complaining about the Jake Paul fight. Those are all the same people that actually watched it. I've never, yeah, you're right. Hey, I props to you for not watching it. But I'm telling you, it's almost like I want to be fooled, I guess, in a way. Not fooled, but I want to be convinced that the fight is going to be amazing. And I like that whole build up and the lead into it. And it got me excited, got me hyped. A lot of people were saying it's interesting because we don't know how the fight's going to go. And that's the thing. It's kind of like a ton of skill and experience versus somebody with the, with the advantages of youth and strength and all these things. So we didn't know how it was going to match up. But the reality of the situation is that was essentially a lie. And we knew at the end of the day that the experience wasn't going to be able to compensate for the lack of physicality. So that's why I got disappointed. I'm one of those people that's complaining, just so you know my perspective. But anyways, that I respect to you because you figured it out and you didn't get scammed. And it is what it is. Okay, we're going to come back to this fight now. So that's very interesting. A lot of people I thought people were going to be praising Michael Chandler, and a lot of people have negative things to say about him and that fight, just like you did. But there's other things that people are talking about that are leaving a bad taste in their mouth. And I really wanted to get you. I was waiting to talk to you about this all weekend to get your perspective. There's another thing that happened. Mike, I sent you a video. I don't know if you got the chance to see it yet from MMA Joey, but Michael Chandler cheated constantly throughout that fight. And I wasn't even aware of all the instances. Of course, I saw the shots to the back of the head. I don't know why the ref didn't step in, but some people counted as many as 10. I think some people counted like 5. Daniel Cormier was yelling about it, but he did that. He also grabbed the fence, put his hands over the fence many, many times. He also constantly had his hands in the gloves of Charles Oliveira, and there were some points where they were almost like stalemated on the ground. And if you watch the fight back, it's not because Oliveira was resting or doing anything. He was trying to get Chandler's hands out of his gloves. And then at one point he finally complained to the ref, as well as Charles' corners were complaining to the ref. And the ref occasionally would say something, but didn't say too much. So I wanted to ask you, Justin, when fighters do these kind of things, like, I know there's got to be some cheating that's going to happen involuntarily. Like, you just are falling and your instinct is to grab the fence, right? And I get that. But when somebody cheats that much and so egregiously, from the fighter perspective, what's your thought? Is your thought, hey, sometimes those things just happen and you can't really blame the fighter? Or are you like, yeah, Michael Chandler kind of fought dirty and he should have been DQ'd?
I don't think he should have been DQ'd, but he definitely fought dirty. Those back of the head strikes in the fifth, and obviously I'm cheering for the finish because I had a good amount of money on Mike to win this fight. But at the end of the day, like, yeah, he definitely cheated. He's been known to do this before. People talked about it before the fight, him being the dirtiest fighter in the UFC. And
Yeah.
I think this fight just solidified. I think he's going to take the reign of Jon Jones with the eye pokes. That was another thing, not to talk about Jon Jones again, but he was posting a lot on Stipe's face. When Stipe would come in, he'd put his hand up and he would touch his face. And I'm like, the referee's not saying anything. And, at one point or another, the referee's there to protect the fighters. And I really think the referee was dropping the ball a lot, especially especially in the Chandler fight and the Jon Jones fight. There was way too much finger extending going on in the Jon Jones fight, and in the Mike Chandler fight, there was numerous times Mike was grabbing the fence, Mike was poking it or grabbing the gloves, Mike was punching him in the back of the head, and the referee kind of just let him continue to fight. If somehow Oliveira would have got knocked out in that last sequence from those back of the head strikes, I mean, would the fight have been reversed? I don't know, but it definitely would end up for debate.
So what does that make you feel as a fighter? How does that make you feel or other fighters towards Michael Chandler?
Oh man, I mean, he has a reputation. I mean, he had a reputation before, but this just solidifies it, man. He's the dirtiest fighter in the UFC.
That's so crazy. And then, so this is the video that my MMA Joey was making about him. And like, again, I didn't know how to feel about it because I'm not in the sport. And like, obviously, I think everybody should follow the rules and be a good sport, be a good representation for people. And it's so weird because he has this image, or he tries to put on this image anyways, I guess. I don't know if it's real or not, right? But of being like a really good family guy, being a really devout Christian, of having a wife and being really devout towards her. They have adopted kids. They do all these things. But then, like, I just don't know how to make sense of that with somebody who's willing to be that unethical in their profession and essentially just like cheat on the open over and over, or do these other dirty things. I think he poked Oliveira early in the fight in the eye as well. And then when Oliveira's eye was messed up and he was holding it, he like charged in and tried to take advantage of the eye poke. I mean, I don't know. How do you what's your conclusion about this? Do you think he's like just a bit of a fraud? Can I make that conclusion, or is that a bridge too far? Is that not really connecting? Should there be a disconnect between how somebody fights and their true moral character?
Yeah, and that's what I'm going to say right now. So as a fighter, we have two personalities. We have who we are outside of the cage, and when that cage door shuts, we have to change. All right, I call it like werewolf syndrome. All right, when the moon comes out, the werewolf comes out, and we're gonna do some crazy shit. I mean, me really well, man. Over the last couple of years, we've grown an incredible relationship. Like, I mean, how passive am I? Out of the cage when we go out, like, dude, I'm passive as hell. I'm not really that into confrontation. But as soon as that cage door shuts, a switch turns, and I want to hurt somebody, and I want to do damage to them, and whether it takes years off their life, that doesn't matter to me. I want to hurt them to my full extent. But again, when I'm outside of the cage, I'm not like that. And I think that's the same thing with Mike Chandler, because I've known again, when he was at Couture, he was always super nice. But in training, he was a fucking asshole. And I think that's just that werewolf mentality per se. When that door shuts, he turns into somebody else, and it shows in his fights.
Do you think that excuses that type of unethical behavior within the fights, or what? Yeah, what's your perspective? You're just like, hey, he hits a switch and that's fine, or do you feel like, nah, that shouldn't be how it is, and I kind of blame him for that?
Well, here's the thing. Like, although you do change, like I said, I go back and I like to call it werewolf syndrome. You do change, but it's a constant. You know that you're changing. You know what you're doing. I know, like, when I know that cage door shuts and I want to hurt him, I don't think like, what can I do dirty to hurt him? Unfortunately, Mike does, man. And it's not an out of control thing. It's not like you hear people get mad and they rage and they see red and they black out and whatever happens. That's not real. That doesn't happen. People that say that are fucking stupid. And with Mike Chandler, yeah, you might change a little bit. Your emotions might change, but you still know right from wrong.
That's fair. Okay. Well, I'm really glad to hear that perspective. Yeah. So that does bum me out, but I'm really, really, really happy that Charles Oliveira won. I went back and watched the fight again, as I mentioned a second time last night, and just watching how dominant he was, how composed he was, even taking that barrage of illegal strikes. Somehow he didn't get knocked out, which is insane. I could not believe he did not get knocked out there. That was crazy. And then for him to come back and still win and still despite all the cheating, he gave Michael Chandler so much credit and so many props. They had like a sort of like a beautiful ending. They were hugging, they were embracing at the end. So, man, it just made me think like watching that fight and then watching Oliveira win despite all that nonsense, it made me feel bad that I even was rooting for Michael Chandler at the beginning. And it made me feel bad for every time that I've ever rooted against Oliveira. Not like I want him to lose, right? But like, let's say he was fighting Islam. I wanted Islam to win just because I'm a big fan of Islam or things like that. And I'm like, man, I have really not appreciated what an amazing fighter Charles Oliveira is, how incredibly composed he can be. And man, it's like when you watch him, even though his base is in grappling, he almost seems like he grew up as a traditional Muay Thai fighter, doesn't he?
Yeah, he looks really long and he has incredible range. He knows how to play his range. And I want to answer, there was a comment we just got
Uh-huh.
from Benitez, man. He goes, as a fighter, I never want to hurt my opponent, man. Hey, listen, I'll be straight with you, man. It's if that's your mindset, you're not going to make it as a fighter, bro. No, and it's no offense to you, but you have to want to hurt your opponent. The whole point of fighting is to hurt your opponent. Now, when you say, "Hey, I don't want to permanently injure them, and don't want to take years off your life," that's one thing. But the whole objective is to hurt your opponent. And fighters that have the mindset like, "Oh, I don't want to hurt my opponent," your career isn't going to last very long. You got to be able to make that separation and understand the difference to it. And this is not me condescending. This is a guy. This is coming from a guy that has been to the top, that's fought in the UFC, has fought in Bellator. If you have the mindset, "Hey, I don't want to hurt my opponent," you need to change your career quick, because if you don't hurt your opponent's going to hurt you. And if you're pulling back on hurting your opponent, you're giving your opponent an opportunity to hurt you, and it's going to be detrimental not only to you physically but to your career as well.
Justin, for somebody who, let's say I was in that position, I was like, all right, I want to be a fighter, and I have that inclination, right? Like, I don't want to hurt somebody, or it would make me I'd feel really guilty about it or something. How do you switch? Oh, and Exy says, I'm a pro, bro. I get what you're saying, though. So he is a professional, which I thought I remembered. Actually, I think I remember Exy now. I think you've commented before. I'm not sure about that, but can you develop that mindset, or how do you develop that mindset of being like, nope, I have to be okay with hurting my opponent, and I need to want to do that in order to win when I'm in the
I
ring,
mean,
or when I'm in the...
yeah, absolutely, man. It's like anybody that's a high level fighter that says they don't want to hurt. Now, again, if I don't want to hurt, I don't want to give them brain damage. I don't want, in 30 years them thinking of the fight they had with me and be like, man, that took years off my life. But at the end of the day, if I can break your arm, I'm going to break your arm. If I can knock you unconscious, I'm going to knock you unconscious. You unfortunately, like, it's just the wrong mindset, because again, if guys that don't want to hurt their opponent, literally, now a lot of people say that. A lot of people, "Oh, I don't want to hurt my opponent." It's bullshit. It's fucking bullshit. Like, you can't be a successful fighter and not want to hurt your opponent. You think Jon Jones didn't want to hit that spinning back kick and break Stipe's ribs? Of course he did. Whether he says he did or didn't, he definitely did. Or why would he throw the fight? I don't want to hurt. Saying you don't want to hurt your opponent and wanting to be a fighter. And again, no offense, Benitez. I'm sure you're a great fighter and this and that. But saying you don't want to hurt your opponent and you fight, to me, it's just it's almost. I'm looking hey, help me out here. I'm looking for a set.
Hypocritical.
Exactly. It's hypocritical. That's exactly the word I'm looking for. It's hypocritical. Hey, I don't want to hurt you, but I'm going to hit you in the face as hard as I can. Like, it's very hypocritical. I hate when people say that. I think people just say that because they want to look good in the public eye, because it's idiotic. Listen, I don't want to put permanent damage on my opponent, but when they're in the ring with me, I want to hurt them as much as I can, to the point that they have to stop and concede so I win the fight. Because at the end of the day, fighting, and when you're a fighter, winning is the most important thing. And if you're not willing to hurt your opponent, your career isn't going to last long. And if you're trying to get to the UFC, or you're trying to get in the PFL or Bellator, man, and again, I'm not throwing shade. This is just coming from a guy that's been around the sport for a really long time. I have 78 MMA fights. If you're not wanting to hurt your opponent when you're in there, you're in the wrong field, man, and your career's not going to go very long or very
We
far.
got and Eggsy, we really appreciate your feedback and your thoughts. It's cool that we got professional fighters coming in to watch, because I'm sure not for me, but to hear perspectives from Justin, of course. So that's cool. I'd like to think as our show continues to grow, we can have both fans of the sport like myself and other professionals like Justin who also want to tune in and appreciate what we say. So it's super cool. Tehran says, I agree, because your opponent is coming to take your head off and they won't take it easy on you. Justin said that to me before. He's like, they would have gladly hurt you. So if you don't want to hurt, it's got to be a two-way street.
Yep, exactly.
And then Two Smiley Fingers says, hits the like button. Wait, I want to give Exy a chance to respond. He just responded. I mean, hurt as in, okay, so he's talking about permanent damage. So he's talking about exactly
okay, that's exactly what I'm saying, man. Yeah, and it's just sounds when people say I don't want to hurt my opponent. It's like, listen, if you give me an armbar and you don't tap, I'm gonna gladly break your arm. And I'm going to gladly choke you unconscious. And if you're cut above your head and you have a gash on your head and you're bleeding into your eyes and the referee doesn't stop the fight, I'm going to gladly keep punching that spot. And you know what? If blood gets in your eyes and you can't see and you have to take more damage of it. But yeah, man, that's okay. That makes a lot more sense, Benitez. And I fought Gabriel Benitez. I don't know if you have any relation to him. I fought him in the UFC a couple years ago. But if you ever want to reach out and ask any more personal questions, man, I'd be happy to reach out on my Instagram or just reach out on the show, and I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Any comments? We always try to, both me and Justin try to respond to as many as we can. Usually when I'm responding, it's from the actual show. When Justin responds, it's from his personal account, Jay Jane. So you'll recognize it when you see it. But anyways, thank you guys for the discussion and the debate. Super fun. Okay, we're going to move on because I know we're almost already at an hour, but there's still a lot to discuss. Bo Nickal comes in, gets the win, which is I don't know. I don't know what to think about this fight. I was like, whoa, this striking does not look so crisp or clean. But he did get the victory, and he did beat a really tough guy. The thought of him now talking all the smack to Khamzat is completely laughable. I don't even know why he's bringing in Khamzat's name after seeing that. It's crazy to me that he's trying to talk about that right now. Maybe in a few years, I don't know, but like that is obviously been put to bed. But yeah, Justin, what do you think about his performance and the overall fight?
Man, what a boring fight. I tell you what, when you're a minus 1,400, I got a little coin. I got a little coin on Paul Craig right before that fight started. Man, like this is the fight. Like, here's the thing, man. And again, talking with Aaron, and I don't always agree with him because he's a professional sports bettor doesn't mean I always agree with his opinion. He's like, why didn't Bo try to wrestle him? Why? It's so stupid. He's this world-class wrestler. Why didn't he try to wrestle Paul Craig? It's like, listen, when you have a world-class wrestler and a world-class jiu-jitsu practitioner, Paul Craig, in my opinion, was expecting to get taken down, and he was ready to go for subs. With that being said, what's the defense to the defense? Not take him down, not be on top, try to beat him in the striking department. And I felt Bo had a very small advantage striking, but and wrestling, he obviously had a huge advantage. But with that being said, Paul Craig is a submission expert off his back.
Yep.
So when people are talking about, oh, he should have just took him down and beat him up, it's like, what you mean, take him down and look at the other side of the coin, take him down and give him the opportunity to find a submission. I thought that's an idiotic standpoint to have. Again, Paul Craig, incredible grappler off his back. Bo Nickal, incredible wrestler. But why give Paul Craig the chance to find a submission, maybe get lucky and find a submission when he can stand on the feet and make it a boring, lackluster fight, but win the fight? On the feet, I think, again, Bo has a slight advantage. On the ground, I don't know if he does or not. We haven't found him to wrestle a high-level grappler. I mean, I know he had a wrestling match with Gordon Ryan. He tuned him up in wrestling, but then eventually got submitted, and I felt Paul Craig probably could have done the same thing had the fight went to the ground. Bo Nickal's striking is terrible. I mean, it's very elementary. Bad. He looks like an amateur fighter in there, and that's not throwing shade. The guy has a much more successful career than I have or ever could dream of. But it's my job to call a spade, and Bo Nickal is not a striker, and his striking was fucking atrocious against Paul Craig.
Does he have a chance to get it that much better in the next 3 years? Like, can it literally get to a point of, let's see, who would be somebody that would maybe be reachable? I don't know. Could he get to like, it's probably impossible, but could he get to like Islam's level of striking? Because Islam has tremendous striking for given his amazing grappling base.
I mean, it's definitely possible, especially in putting in the time in. But again, he needs to stick to his strengths, and his strengths are grappling. And more importantly than his striking, let's focus on his grappling, because he is such a good wrestler that he'll be able to take anybody down at almost any time. So you look at someone like Jake Shields, who fought George St. Pierre and he's a coach of mine. You look at Jake Shields. Jake Shields is striking, Jake, and I'm sorry if you see this. Your striking is bad, bro. Like, it's fucking terrible. But he was such a great grappler that he could dictate where the fights go, when he's on his back or on top, and I think that's what Bo Nickal, instead of trying to improve in striking where there's such a huge gap, I think he needs to improve his grappling defense so he can take guys down like Paul Craig and not have to worry about getting submitted, playing to his strengths, because obviously striking is his strength. And if he starts focusing on striking, especially the next 2-3 years, he's going to lose a little bit in his wrestling and grappling. And I'm speaking from experience, being a college wrestler, man. I used to take guys down, everybody. I'd come to the gym, I'd take Mike Pyle down as an amateur fighter. But as I progressed and got comfortable with striking and my striking started to get really good and I started knocking guys out, I totally abandoned my wrestling. And fuck, I haven't taken a guy down in, geez, 5 years. And honestly, it was very detrimental to my career because, again, I wasn't playing to my strengths. I wasn't a good striker, so I focused on my striking for almost 5 years straight, my kickboxing, my boxing. Then I got so comfortable with kickboxing and boxing, I abandoned my grappling and my wrestling. And again, if you watched all my fights in the UFC, I think I had one takedown in my 5 fights in the UFC, and I was just trying to stand and bang with guys. And if and you look at guys like Gray Maynard, who did the exact same thing. We're talking about Gray Maynard, Division I, Michigan State wrestler. He's from Ohio. He was a state champion in Ohio at the best wrestling school in Ohio. And early on in his career, yeah, he was boring and this and that, but towards the end of his career, he was boxing with Gil Martinez, and he got really good at boxing. He was so strong, he could knock guys out. Well, then he abandoned his wrestling, and you saw it against Frankie Edgar. He hurt Frankie, but then, couldn't go on. And I think that happens a lot. You get these incredible world-class wrestlers that abandon their strengths to try to do something new. And if he focuses on his striking, I think he's going to get the Gray Maynard effect, that he's going to lose so much in his wrestling focusing on something else. He's going to get comfortable with striking if he focuses on it. He's going to abandon his strongest piece of his game, and that's his wrestling.
Now, if he never, okay, so Eggsy Benitez says, hey,
I hate to do this to you guys, but I have to work at 4. I have to eat. No, it's fine. We can keep going. But okay. I have to eat. I have to eat something.
Okay, go ahead and eat. Guys. No, because we're having such a fun conversation. Real quick. So Eggsy Benitez says, Bo Nickal going to be the next Woodley falling in love with his hands. It could be, but here's my main question. Again, I'm only thinking about the Hamzat fight. If he never improves his striking, or maybe even marginally improves his striking, but still stays committed to wrestling, how is he ever going to beat Hamzat Chimaev, who's got great striking and probably just as good wrestling, if not better?
Well, game plan. Take him into deep water. Again, focus not, negate, make it a wrestling match. And Bo Nickal says often that he's a better wrestler. So
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. But what if he is? Yeah. He has to be better at his strength. He wants to take his strongest strength, which is his wrestling, and impose it on somebody like Hamzat. That's what I think he'd have to do. I think he's way too far behind in striking. I think even if he focuses on striking for the next 2 or 3 years, he's not going to catch Hamzat in his striking.
All right, well, there's Bo Nickal, and again, I don't know if the boos were warranted. I don't know what it is about Bo Nickal, but people just seem to hate him in the world of mixed martial arts, and they always boo him. I don't see what's so unlikable about him. I like the guy. I do want to see him continuing to do well, and I was excited for the fight, even though it was very anticlimactic, but he did his best. He came out with the victory. Let's see what happens next. There is no way at this current time that he has any shot whatsoever against Hamzat Chimaev. That's the only thing that kind of aggravates me, that he continues to say stuff like that, but it's like, come on, dude, this is absolutely stupid. Okay, let's go to the last 2 topics. So I know we're already at the top of, or over an hour here, but thank you guys for sticking with us. We really appreciate it. This is so much fun for us. We look forward to this every week. Holy smokes. In the midst of all this nonsense of Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul, the worst fight in the history of boxing and combat sports, we didn't hear or didn't pay attention to this incredible announcement, 2-part announcement. Shavkat versus Ian Garry. They are the new main event for UFC, for UFC 310, which is absolutely incredible. It's not for an interim title. I think the UFC specifically did not make it for an interim title because of the mess that happened last time, because their hands were tied, having to put everybody pressuring for Tom Aspinall against Jon Jones, all that nonsense. So I think that's why they're not doing it, even though it would sell more pay-per-views. But what a fight. Shavkat versus Ian Garry. What are your first thoughts, and what's your first feeling on how this is going to go?
I'm going to tell you this, and you're not going to like it. You ready?
Yeah, you're going to say Ian Garry's going to lose.
I fucking hate this matchup. And I think I hate it, and I'm going to tell you why. Now, when I say I hate the matchup, I think it's going to be an incredible fight. This is going to be a fucking banger of a fight.
Okay.
But from a business standpoint, we have 2 up-and-coming, undefeated fighters. Somebody in this fight is going to lose a lot of credibility. If Shavkat goes in there 18-0 with 18 finishes and Ian Garry gets the win, oh fuck, he's not a mutant anymore. He is beatable. You have the other hand, another undefeated fighter, Ian Garry. Why are we putting these guys' undefeated record on the line? Somebody's going to lose. Somebody's losing their undefeated streak, and they're going to lose a lot of credibility. Why aren't we giving Shavkat Usman? That's the fight to make. And he can go in there, beat a former champ, become 19-0, and have credibility to the next title, have warrant for the next title fight. And then Ian Garry goes in, wins a fight or 2 fights. And now we have 2 undefeated fighters, if we do this right and do the right business plan and the right business matchups, to have this, this huge matchup, undefeated fighter versus undefeated fighter for the UFC championship. I think this fight is happening way too fast. I think we're really hurting somebody's career. What if Ian Garry goes, okay, let's say Shavkat goes in there and gets starched by Ian Garry, gets knocked out unconscious. All right, and now he has a loss. All right, so now, okay, we give him a rebound fight. But he doesn't officially recover from that knockout. Now he loses 2 in a row. Well, now he's out of title contention. We don't have the scare of this guy that's 18-0 anymore. And now we have to find the next best thing. Instead, keep building these guys until these guys are ready for a title fight. Don't risk their undefeated record. Being undefeated on winning streak in the UFC is so rare. It's so rare, and it's so hard to do. One of these guys is going to lose this fight, and he's going to lose all that credibility from being an undefeated UFC fighter, and I think it's a bad business decision. Now, from a fan perspective, this fight is going to be awesome. I can't wait to watch this. But from a business perspective, I would expect better out of the UFC. I'd expect smarter business moves out of the UFC. I really feel they dropped the ball here. Give Usman the chance to show that he still has it, and if he doesn't still have it, give Shavkat that matchup. Let him win and go be the UFC or fight for the UFC championship in his next fight. I hate this matchup from a business standpoint, and I think it's a huge mistake. And it potentially could end one of these guys' careers. And when I say that is if Ian Garry goes in there and loses and gets fucking finished, like he's going to start questioning himself. And now we have to worry about a rebound from a guy. You know, when you're undefeated and you're winning, you know, I look at guys like Max Raxkopf. Max Raxkopf, him and I were teammates. He's a firefighter now. He is incredible. He's the best one of the best grappler wrestlers I've ever trained with. Him and I had our UFC debut on the same card. He was undefeated as an amateur, undefeated as a pro, finishing, knocking everybody off. The kid was unbeatable. He's finishing everybody. He has his UFC debut the same day I did. He fought the fight before I fought. He fought Austin Hubbard. He went in there, got his ass beat by Austin Hubbard, and never fought again. He couldn't mentally handle it, and I'm not throwing shade at him because he whooped my ass in the gym countless times. But being able to battle back, having this idea that I'm unbeatable, nobody can beat me, and then you go in there and you get your ass beat or you get finished, and he did. If you guys remember, he couldn't get off the stool going into the 3rd round from Austin Hubbard. He never fought again. He might have fought again in a smaller promotion after that, but he never was the same. And it ended his career. We had this great, incredible, up-and-coming fighter, man. I'm telling you, Max Raxkopf was the real deal, is the real deal. Fuck, he'll go in the gym and fuck everybody else right now. But when you lose that little piece of confidence, when you go from being this unbeatable, unbreakable guy, and then you have to face some adversity and you couldn't get through the adversity, ultimately, sometimes it can end your career, and I'd be worried that it would happen with one of these guys in that circumstance.
Interesting. Oh, so that's a very fascinating perspective. So I never even those thoughts never crossed my mind. My way of thinking about it was, I think Shavkat is favored. I think most people are picking Shavkat. He will probably win. And I thought Ian Garry would get massive credibility just from taking such a dangerous fight, wanting to fight him at this point. Obviously, it's a jump in the rankings, so it's still a net positive, and he was fighting for the title, so that gives him good exposure. But I thought it was pretty ballsy that he wanted to take the fight, and so it was kind of win-win for Ian Garry, but you make a really good point that I hadn't considered. Now, I think the real fight that the UFC actually wanted, because this is also, we're going to talk about this afterwards, Colby Covington is back, and he's fighting Joaquin Buckley, which is, I'm surprised because that's none of the fight. He did not mention that as one of the fights he wanted. He wanted to fight Paddy Pimblett and like all these weird call outs that he was making just to give him a massive advantage. I think the UFC was like, enough is enough. You're not doing one of these stupid gimmicky fights. You're either taking Joaquin Buckley, I imagine Ian Garry and Shavkat. I bet they were all on the table. I bet you the reason why Ian Garry is fighting Shavkat is because Usman didn't feel like he had enough time to get ready, so he wasn't able to do it, even though they did want, I bet they wanted that fight. I bet Colby was their next option to put him against Shavkat. He's still highly ranked. Shavkat will go out there and annihilate him, but I bet you Colby refused. And then I bet you they were like, all right, well, fine. We'll do Colby versus Ian Garry, and then we'll find somebody else for Shavkat, and Colby probably refused Ian Garry because he doesn't want to be embarrassed. So instead, Colby goes against Joaquin Buckley, because at least he'll have the advantage in the smack talking. I think this all boils down to Colby being difficult to work with and wanting to pick his fights, and that's why we're in this weird position. But as you mentioned, while this might be negative for one or both of the fight, or one of the fighters at least, I guess whoever comes out on the losing end, man, is it exciting. And these are two guys that are extremely confident, that have had pretty much all exciting fights, maybe with the exception of like one of Ian Gary's fights, but they've all been like pretty darn exciting. And yeah, it's gonna be a heck of a show. So in terms of the fight in and of itself, excluding what might be the aftermath, I'm very, very excited. So this is something we can definitely look forward to from that perspective.
You know,
okay,
Ronda, real quick, like Ronda Rousey said it during her reign as a champion, and I got to hear her say it live, and she was having a conversation with Elise Anderson, who was another incredible fighter. Ronda Rousey said it: the most important thing in fighting is that O, is the O.
Really?
She said it's the most important thing. She said being undefeated in the UFC or being undefeated in the MMA is the most important thing for your career, because when you're undefeated, you have so many bargaining chips that you can determine a lot. Now, if you're coming off losses, a lot of times you're at the will of the UFC and you have to do as they say. But when you're undefeated, you can make shot calls. You can dictate what you want, because that O is so important. And unfortunately, these guys are great, both up and coming, hungry guys. One of them is going to lose that O, and they're going to lose a lot of steam. You know, feed these guys a couple more. I mean, I'm not saying that. I mean, how often would you rather see this fight as a main event, for nothing, or next year when both of these guys have even more credibility if they're undefeated? And if they go out and they lose, then they lose. But why put them against each other? If they lose a fight against, if Usman somehow beat Shavkat, all right, well, guess what? Usman's the deal now. Usman's back in the mix. But I don't know. I just don't. Again, it's going to be an incredible fight. But unfortunately, I just hate seeing one of these guys really hurt their career and lose that O for almost nothing. Because, I mean, I guess it's for number one contendership, but just to get to number one contendership and then fight the champion, I mean, I want to see these guys being both undefeated, both fighting for the championship at the same time.
I think you're 100% right. I bet you the UFC tried to do it. I bet you they did, and I bet you they couldn't because of Colby or, whatever other reasons. Maybe they were dealing with Usman not having enough time for a training camp. So I bet you they didn't want to do what you said. But yes, that is a great point. It will be unfortunate. It would have been so much cooler to see them face off undefeated for the title. That would have been crazy. But I guess it is what it is. Still going to be a cool fight. Let's go on to the last fight that I want to talk about. The last announcement that I'm very surprised by. But again, I think the UFC was like, Colby, either you do this or we're cutting you, something like that. And he's fighting Joaquin Buckley. Just to end the show on this, what do you think Colby's chances are against this up-and-comer? I mean, not even an up-and-comer. He's pretty established at this point, but still on the rise.
I don't think Buckley's as good as he makes himself out to be. I mean, he's had some incredible performances. That spinning back kick knockout a couple years ago, obviously one to remember. I think he beats Stephen Thompson as well.
On the feet.
I mean, not that impressed. I mean, Steven's old, and he's slowing down a lot. He's not the same guy he used to be. I think this is a building fight. Joaquin is coming on. He's had some great fights, and I think Joaquin wins. Unless Colby can get him down, but Buckley is so big and strong that I think Colby's going to have a really hard time, and he's very athletic. I'm not a Buckley fan, actually. I don't like him on the mic. I think he's an idiot. He makes stupid call-outs. He's just like, okay, here's a perfect example. Joaquin, to me, on the mic is like Bilal. Like, it hurts me to listen to him talk on the mic because he makes the most outlandish call-outs that don't make any sense, and it just is annoying as fuck, and just like Bilal on the mic. So I have a very similar feeling of this towards, Buckley that I do Bilal. With that being said, I hate Colby more. I hope Joaquin goes in there and knocks his head off.
I agree. And actually, I think Joaquin is way worse than Bilal on the mic. We thought Bilal was nonsensical on the mic because he was saying he can box so well and do all this stuff. But then he actually outboxed Leon Edwards. And he actually did dominate him. And he actually did kind of make it look easy. So I think we got to give Bilal a lot more credit than Joaquin. Joaquin says just nonsense that doesn't make any sense. I don't like his brand of trash talking either. But tremendous athlete. And yeah, I hope he wins too against Colby. So that's it. That's the entire show. That's the recap. Let us know what you guys think in the comments. Thank you, everybody, for engaging in the live chat. That was a lot of fun. And hopefully we will be making a lot of content this week as well, just to kind of recap what has happened and what we hope to see next. But, man, that Francis versus Jake Paul fight, that is fire. Let's see if that actually goes down. I'm going to make a whole video about that specifically either tonight or tomorrow. So that's a really fun one. And let's see what happens with Jon Jones. Hopefully Jon Jones earned all of your respect. He definitely earned mine in spades. What a tremendous performance. And I thought Stipe, I know, Justin, you thought he looked old, but just to end on this, I actually did think he looked quite good. And if you rewatch the fight, especially the first round before he got taken down and brutally ground and pounded, I think you'll see he looked pretty fresh and pretty sharp. You just might be remembering only after that point, which I did as well. And I think a lot of people are sort of remembering those last two rounds saying Stipe looks slow. Dana White as well came out and said, don't start saying that Stipe looks slow. He did not look slow. He looked slow because of what Jon Jones did to him. I agree with that respectfully, but let us know what you guys think. Thank you guys so much for joining. Again, please click that like button if you did like the stream. Make sure to click subscribe if you want to join along and see us week to week do the show Mondays and Fridays at 1:30 p.m. PST. That's it. Thank you guys so much for joining, and we will see you guys in the next episode. Take it easy.